How does it feel to be a loser? That was the first thing my son-in-law asked me. Not happy birthday, not how have you been. Just that question, thrown across the table like a slap. For a moment nobody breathed. The birthday candles on the dessert tray hadn't even arrived yet, but the celebration was already dead. The loud Friday night crowd at Marigold Steakhouse kept clinking glasses and laughing around us. Yet at our table, everything froze. I sat there in my modest gray blazer, the one I wore to church and job interviews, suddenly feeling like sandpaper against their polished world. Maybe I already looked out of place before he even opened his mouth. Emily's eyes flicked to me, then away, fast, nervous, guilty. She sat beside Andrew like she was torn between standing up for me and staying seated for him. Andrew reclined in his chair, flashing that gold watch like it was part of his personality. He raised his glass in mock celebration. "Come on, David," he said loudly. "Don't be shy. We're all just curious how it feels to retire into nothing." I cleared my throat, trying to stay level. "I'm just happy to be here with family." "Oh," he laughed, wide and dramatic. "Family, man. That's cute." He nudged the man sitting beside him. "Can you believe he drives a pickup older than I am?" "What is it, 1992? "It still runs," I replied quietly. "Runs?" He scoffed. "It screams for mercy every time it climbs your driveway." Patricia, Andrew's mother in her pearl necklace, didn't say a word. She just watched me with the expression of someone who'd expected disappointment and was delighted to witness it confirmed. Leonard leaned back beside her, arms crossed and smirking like this was entertainment purchased with the steak. Emily leaned toward me, voice trembling. "Dad, please don't make a scene." The words hit me harder than Andrew's insults. I looked at her, my own daughter, and the plea wasn't protective. It wasn't loving. It was terrified of embarrassment. Of me. Andrew tapped his glass for attention. "Everyone, toast to David, proof that playing life safe gets you nowhere." The table laughed. I didn't. A camera flashed. One of Andrew's friends, dressed loud, ego louder, held his phone high. Snapping photos like this humiliation was a show. "Get one of the birthday boy," he said. Emily flinched but didn't stop it. Leonard finally chimed in, voice dripping with patronizing philosophy. "Don't take it personally, David. Not everyone is built for climbing the ladder." "Yeah," Andrew jumped in, seizing the moment. "Some of us are made for the top, and others, well," he gestured at me, "retire into obscurity." I felt something inside me tighten, then go numb. I wasn't shaking in anger. Something colder settled in, the realization that their disrespect wasn't new. I had just been pretending not to see it. Emily whispered again, barely audible, "Dad, please don't start anything tonight." So she really believed anything would start with me. I straightened a little, though my voice stayed soft. "I'm proud of the life I've lived." Andrew laughed so loudly half the restaurant heard. He slapped the table, adding to the spectacle, "Oh, that's precious. The man who wasted his whole life is proud." Another camera flash, more eyes turning our way. The waiter slowed while passing, ready to intervene, but I gave a tiny nod, that everything was fine. It wasn't fine, but I refused to let strangers pity me. Andrew leaned in, expression sharpening beneath the drunk bravado. "You could have been more. You could have done more. But you didn't, and now, here you are." Emily peeled her gaze away from me like it hurt to look. That hurt more than anything else at the table. There was noise everywhere, forks scraping plates, laughter, music, but around me it felt like silence pressed into my ears. I wasn't angry, not yet. I wasn't even ashamed. I was simply done pretending. I lowered my eyes. Under the table, my fingers twisted the napkin until it nearly tore. My breath shook, a tiny shudder I made sure nobody heard, and still, I said nothing. The moment stretched, and in that quiet, something irreversible settled inside me. A line crossed, a door closed, not because of what they said, but because of who they showed themselves to be. And as the noise of the steakhouse wrapped back around us, I knew one thing with absolute clarity. This night would change everything. I didn't sleep when I got home that night. I just sat on the edge of the bed in the quiet rental house, shoes still on, staring at the framed photo on my nightstand, the same one that's been there for 17 years. Laura, holding a mug of tea, hair tucked behind her ear, smiling like she always did when she saw me watching her instead of the sunrise. Nothing in my life ever looked more like home than that smile. I ran my thumb over the glass, and for a moment I could almost smell the old workshop on her, cedar, varnish, sawdust. Back then, we were always covered in the stuff. I was a carpenter and woodworking craftsman for 34 years. Not flashy, not wealthy, but honest work that built things people could touch, remember, pass down. In the 90s, Timberline Crafts was my pride. I designed custom cabinets, rocking chairs, tables shaped around the natural grain of the wood. People trusted me because I never cut corners. That was my name back then, the guy who does things right. Funny how easily that reputation disappears when money does. The shop closed within 2 years of Laura getting sick. I didn't think twice about selling it all. Not then. Machines, tools, contracts, everything. I remember signing the papers in the hospital cafeteria, my pen shaking because I hadn't slept. I told myself, a business can be rebuilt. A person can't. Emily was still in college. Andrew wasn't her husband yet, but they were dating. He pitched in for a few tuition payments when things got bad. He never misses a chance to mention it. Not to me, not to her, not to anyone who will listen. I save your future. That's his story. I failed her, according to everyone else. These days I live in a modest one-bedroom rental. The kind of place where you hear the neighbor's microwave beep, and the heater rattles like it's shivering. It's enough though. A roof, a bed, a quiet porch where I drink coffee in the mornings. The first thing I always see when I wake up is Laura's photo. The first thing I always smell in my memory is the sawdust. Sometimes I still catch it on myself. Not real sawdust, but the echo of it. When I volunteer at St. Mary's Community Center, teaching teens woodworking, I come home with the same ache in my shoulders I used to complain about in my 30s. And I love it. I don't teach them to make anything fancy. Simple shelves, stools, jewelry boxes. But the look in their eyes when they sand something smooth with their own hands, that's worth more than any paycheck. I thought dignity came from precision, from integrity, from doing things right. But that night at the restaurant, humiliation has a way of rewriting old beliefs, the things I used to be proud of. Patience, humility, quiet living, suddenly felt like excuses for failure in the eyes of people who cared more about status than respect. Around 2 in the morning, I got up and pulled a flannel shirt out of the closet. In the left breast pocket was an old paycheck envelope, folded and refolded until the edges softened. Inside, $147.83 after taxes. My pay from the community center for the month. I didn't cash it because it reminded me that I wasn't useless, that someone somewhere still thought my work mattered. But staring at it that night, it looked smaller than ever. A knock rattled my front door around lunchtime the next day. I opened it to see Michael standing there, hands in his jacket pockets, shoulders tense in that way that meant he was worried about me. Michael and I have been friends since middle school. He runs a real estate office now. Big houses, big money, big confidence. But he's the kind of man who doesn't forget where he came from. Didn't see you at breakfast this morning, he said. So I figured you were hiding. I gave a tired exhale. Just didn't sleep. That's all. You want to talk about last night, he said. Not a question. No, I answered. But he stepped inside anyway. He walked over to the kitchen counter, picked up a mug, rinsed it in the sink like it was his house. That clown said more than he should have. I sat down heavily. He didn't say anything that wasn't already true. Michael slammed the mug into the drying rack. Stop. You don't get to rewrite your whole life because some spoiled kid needed to show off. I rubbed my forehead. I don't know, Mike. Maybe everyone's been too polite to say it. Maybe I disappointed people. You disappointed nobody who matters, he said firmly. His voice softened. Emily loves you. She's just married to a tornado. I didn't answer. He glanced at Laura's photo, then at me. She'd tell you the same thing I'm telling you. Yeah, I whispered. But she's gone. And now I'm just an old man with nothing to show for what I gave up. He didn't argue. He just put a hand on my shoulder, squeezed once, and left without another word. That was his way. Later that evening, while I sat outside on the porch, flipping that paycheck envelope between my fingers, a car slowed near the curb. Sarah, one of the waitresses from Marigold Steakhouse, leaned out the window. Hey, she said gently. I saw you leave last night. Are you okay? I nodded once. Just needed air. She hesitated. People like him, they think kindness is weakness. Don't let them be right. I wanted to believe her. She gave a small smile. I work Sunday lunch shift. Come by, sit at the bar. Coffee's on me. Then she drove off. It was such a small kindness, but it nearly undid me, because it reminded me that the world wasn't divided into winners and losers. Some people still valued decency, effort, character. I sat there long after her car disappeared, fingers still worrying the envelope. I wanted to rebuild my belief that dignity mattered more than wealth. But after last night, I wasn't sure. There comes a moment when a man starts asking questions he never asked before. Did I fail my family? Did I make the right choices? Or did I sacrifice everything for nothing? I didn't have answers. The only thing I knew, or hoped, was that success wasn't meant to be measured in money or applause, but humiliation. Humiliation makes you question everything you thought was true, and I could feel that question slowly tightening around my life, waiting to be answered. The dinners didn't stop. They multiplied. Every weekend like clockwork. There was a text from Emily. Dad, dinner tonight. Andrew got us into this place. Family bonding night. The wording always sounded sweet, but the tone underneath, it was presentation, not affection. I could feel it. Even before the first fork touched the plate, each restaurant was louder than the last. The kind of places where napkins were folded like origami swans, and waiters introduced themselves like CEOs. On the third dinner, I reached for the bill out of habit, an instinct from a life of providing, and Andrew placed his hand on mine, like he was pinning a bug. David, he laughed, let people with real jobs handle things. Okay, Emily swatted his shoulder. Oh my God, Andrew, stop. He's joking, but Andrew's eyes never left mine, and his hand stayed on the bill until I let go. The fourth dinner was worse. Andrew leaned back in his chair as the waiter poured wine. Something from France that cost more than my monthly groceries. So Dad, what's retirement like? He asked loudly, too loudly. I told him gently, it's peaceful. I'm learning to enjoy quiet mornings. He chuckled, shaking his head. I'd go insane doing nothing. I need ambition, drive. I guess some people don't mind slowing down, Emily added. He's just teasing. Dad, ignore him. But Andrew wasn't teasing. Every question he asked had a spotlight built into it, shining on what I didn't have. What he did, vacations, cars, watch brands I'd never heard of. He compared everything. You're staying at home while we're in Santorini. Must be great saving all that money, man. Grocery budgeting. I can't imagine. We just buy whatever. You quit working early. I could never walk away from success like that. The first few times, I smiled, stayed still, focused on breathing. Old men don't win shouting matches with arrogant young men. They just confirm the stereotype, but something else happened at the fifth dinner. Andrew raised his glass before dessert even arrived. Everybody, a toast. People lifted their glasses, expecting something sweet or sentimental. Andrew slapped his palm on my shoulder and lifted his glass higher. To people who win in life, not people who quit. There was a second of quiet, tiny, sharp, before the table laughed. Emily's eyes widened. Andrew, he shrugged. What, it's a joke. He knows I love him. Everyone was still watching me, waiting to see whether I'd break or bark. I lifted my glass, my hand steady enough to feel like a small miracle, and I simply said, to character. Andrew's smile twitched, just slightly. I thought maybe the dinners would stop after that. Maybe the silence in the car afterward would speak to Emily. Maybe she'd read the tension. But instead they escalated, and then came the engagement party. One of Andrew's colleagues, a young man named Patrick, was getting married, and Andrew invited Emily and me as if we were props. Big ballroom, expensive suits, champagne trays drifting like swans among the crowd. I stood by the dessert table, watching from a quiet distance, content not to be the center of anything. Then I heard Andrew's voice cut through the music, all volume, no grace. Hey guys, come here, come here. You'll love this. When a man calls a crowd to watch something, it's rarely kind. I didn't even have time to step away before the circle formed. Andrew threw his arm around me, casual for appearance, controlling in pressure. Everyone, this is my father-in-law. Good man, hardworking back in the day. I nodded politely. Then he leaned forward like whispering a secret, but loud enough for the entire cluster of colleagues to hear. He can't even afford the house he lives in. Laughs. Shutter clicks from phones. A few mock gasps. Someone whistled like it was a comedy club. I didn't move. My chest tightened, not hot with anger, but cold with grief. The thing about humiliation is that it doesn't burn first. It sinks. I heard my own heartbeat in my ears, steady but heavy. I thought of my late wife, how she would have touched my cheek and told me, don't let small people make you small. So I didn't respond. I just looked at Andrew, really looked at him, and watched something flicker. He didn't get what he wanted. Not the explosion, not the surrender. He clapped my back hard and walked off like he'd just won something. Emily came rushing to minutes later, her voice shaky. Dad, he didn't mean it. He's nervous around colleagues. He tries too hard. I nodded. I know, no, Really? She insisted, gripping my arm, desperate for reassurance, not truth. You're not mad, right? I answered the only way that would keep the peace, of course not. But inside something had shifted. A small quiet. The kind that precedes decisions. 2 weeks later came the final invitation. The prettiest trap. The Elkwood Club, Emily texted. Andrew booked a private table. Big business partners will be there. It'll mean a lot if you come. I didn't want to go. Every instinct in me said these aren't family dinners. They're performances. But Emily sounded hopeful. Or maybe scared. And fathers show up even when they're tired. The reservation was under Andrew's name. Of course, he repeated that at least 3 times in the car. The Elkwood doesn't take everyone. You know, you need recognition in the right circles. People like being around success. Emily squeezed his knee and murmured, "Babe, stop." But she sounded rehearsed, not sincere. As the car rolled toward the tall stone gates of the club, I looked out the window. Manicured lawns, glowing chandeliers behind towering windows. But all I felt was a tightening in my chest. A familiar pull. These dinners weren't random, weren't accidental. They were staged, curated, designed. Andrew didn't want conversation. He wanted audience. And somewhere deep inside me, not with anger, but with certainty, I finally understood. He was building something. An image, a story, a spectacle with me as the joke. I didn't know the ending yet. Not the shape of the retaliation or the cost of the lesson he was begging to learn. But I did know this. The man who walked into the Elkwood Club that night was not the same man who walked into the first dinner. Not anymore. The valet line outside the Elkwood Club was long enough that some guests stepped out of their cars to chat. Emily went inside first to check the table. Andrew stayed back to make a call, or so he claimed. I remained by the fountain in the courtyard, far enough not to intrude, close enough that the night air carried voices when people stopped pretending to be discreet. A black SUV pulled up. A man I didn't recognize stepped out, and Andrew greeted him like a fraternity brother, loud, performative, too excited for real friendship. Tonight's the night. Man, Andrew said, pacing with manic energy. The man laughed. Tonight for what? Andrew didn't hesitate. Not even enough to pretend. I'm going to make him snap. My breath caught, the kind that doesn't show but costs effort to hide. The man asked, "Who?" Andrew jerked his head toward the club entrance, where Emily had disappeared moments earlier. Her father. I'm done with everyone treating him like some wise old saint. The guy's a nobody. I want people to see it. The man whistled. That's personal. Andrew shrugged, with a grin that made my spine ache. When he breaks, everyone will remember who the real man at the table is. He said it with pride, like humiliation was a trophy. The man lowered his voice, but I still heard every word. Who's even coming that matters? Andrew's tone sharpened, arrogant, hungry. The boss. Big connections tonight. If I look like the strongest man in the room, the guy who can put another man in his place, things could change for me. He laughed, and the sound echoed across the stone courtyard. I didn't move, didn't turn away, didn't clear my throat to warn him I was there. Some truths are meant to be overheard. And in that moment, something inside me loosened. All those dinners, all the digs at my retirement, the comparisons, the humiliations, none of it was carelessness. It was strategy, a performance designed to make him shine by dimming everyone else. And it had nothing to do with family. Inside the restaurant, a long mahogany table stretched across the private dining hall. Golden candlelight, velvet chairs, too much space between plates, the kind of dinner where discomfort was decorative. I took my seat quietly. Andrew was in host mode, chest puffed, laughter booming, eyes flicking toward me to make sure I understood my role. The foil. The waiter, a young woman with chestnut hair and kind eyes, approached me with a soft smile. "Good evening, sir. I'll be assisting your table tonight. If you need anything at all, you ask for Sarah, okay?" She pressed a hand gently on my shoulder, just a second too long to be procedural, and slipped away. Dinner stretched into forced conversation about profits, mergers, crypto, Teslas, none of which had anything to do with human connection. Andrew clinked his glass every 9 minutes, it seemed. To attention, to validation, to applause. At one point he leaned across the table, loud enough for everyone to hear. "So David, what's it like being out of the game?" He wanted an audience again, wanted the crack, the snap, the evidence of superiority. I simply said, "Restful." He waited, eyes bright with anticipation, like a child shaking a soda can and waiting for the explosion. When none came, he moved on, irritated, but I wasn't angry. Not anymore. Understanding takes the place of pain. Clarity is a quiet anesthetic. It was near the end of the meal, after the dessert plates were cleared and the business partners were talking among themselves, when Sarah approached again, but this time subtly. "Sir," she whispered, "someone left this for you. They said specifically not to hand it to anyone else." She placed a sealed white envelope on the table in front of me, discreet enough not to draw attention, visible enough to feel like a thread being pulled in fate. I nodded gratefully. "Thank you." She stepped away without waiting to watch me open it. I slid a finger under the seal. Slow, deliberate, and the sound of the paper tearing felt louder than it should have. Inside were two documents. The first, a contract update. Timberline Crafts LLC, owner, founder, David Carter, renewed last month, signed, approved, active. My throat tightened, not with fear this time, with memory. The woodworking shop, the one I closed after my wife passed, the one I walked away from because grief swallowed every ounce of energy I had left. The second item was a handwritten note, Michael's handwriting. "When you're ready to reopen, everything is set. The investors believe in you, not your past, not your pain, you." I never told anyone because I wanted it to be your decision, not pressure. No rush, no expectations, just waiting for you, brother. My hand trembled, lightly, invisibly from across the table. But I felt it, because in one moment, two truths collided. Andrew wanted to prove I was a failure. Meanwhile, someone else, someone who'd known my life, my losses, my worth, believed I hadn't even started my second chapter yet. The grief that had been sitting in my chest for weeks, heavy, bruising, dissolved into something steadier. Not pride, not revenge, not anger. Clarity. I looked up, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't see Andrew as a villain, just a desperate man trying to outrun his own emptiness. He needed the world to see him as a giant, so he needed me to be small. But I wasn't, not anymore. The contract sat inside my jacket, but the transformation happened inside my bones. Andrew lifted his glass once again, tapping the rim for attention. "Gentlemen, a toast." He smiled at me first, waiting for weakness. I sat still, calm, unmoved. He didn't know it yet, but something had already shifted beyond his reach. The humiliation he wanted no longer had a place to land. I didn't need to win against him. I just needed to stop playing his game. And justice, real justice, was no longer about proving anything at this table. It was about dignity, about setting things right later, quietly, deliberately, in a way he would never see coming until it was too late. For the first time in weeks, my heart wasn't racing. It was steady. I didn't know exactly how the story would unfold from here, only that it would, and that I would write the ending myself. The long dining hall shimmered like a staged photograph, chandeliers dripping glass light, soft jazz floating from speakers hidden behind draped curtains, sharply dressed guests leaning into their conversations like every word was a performance. The host stand led us to a private table near the center of the room, but Andrew stepped forward quickly, interrupting. "No, no, we want the long table in the back, the big one." He smirked at Emily, and she tried to return the smile, but her eyes looked tense. We walked past tables of polished businessmen and women, until we reached a mahogany slab nearly too long for the room. Andrew directed everyone's seating with the precision of a casting director. "Guys, over here. Emily, next to me. Patrick, across. And David," he tapped the farthest chair, the one at the end where no one could hear unless he shouted. "Right there is perfect. Best view," Emily whispered. "Andrew." He ignored her. I sat down quietly anyway. Fighting a seat is still fighting. And tonight, I wouldn't give him that. The wine arrived. The laughter warmed. The performance began. Andrew lifted his glass before the appetizers even landed. "To family, right? Especially when you have to rescue them." He winked in my direction. A few guests laughed lightly, unsure of the context. He leaned back in his chair, voice louder. I basically pulled Emily out of a broke family situation and gave her the life she deserves. She upgraded. Emily flinched. "Andrew, stop." He kissed her temple loudly, ornamental affection. "Babe, they know I'm joking." He didn't stop. A guest asked him about his recent business success, and it was all the permission he needed. Success is earned, not inherited, not luck. It's being the strongest guy in every room. Some people freeze under pressure. Some of us rise. He pointed toward me casually with his glass. Other people quit when life gets hard. That's why they end up retired early, or whatever. There it was, the first jab. I didn't speak, didn't twitch. Silence sometimes kills cruelty faster than yelling. But Andrew wasn't satisfied. When the entrees arrived, thick-cut tenderloin on black slate plates, he raised his voice again. "So, David," he said, louder than the music, "what's your monthly income now? Fixed or super fixed?" Guests shifted uncomfortably. Patrick coughed. Someone sipped water too quickly. Emily whispered, "Please, not here." But Andrew kept going. He had spent too long setting the stage. He leaned in, hands clasped like a man offering sincere counsel. Except every word was sharpened. "Just be honest. How does it feel to be a loser?" The air split. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Jazz blurred into background static. Someone gasped. Someone else muttered, "Jesus Christ." I just breathed. I looked at him the way a storm looks at a match, not threatened, just waiting. Andrew's eyes widened a fraction. He hadn't expected calm. He doubled down. "I'm serious. Tell us all, no spin. How does it feel knowing you peaked 20 years ago? Knowing everyone else at this table is surpassing you? Knowing you're a voice interrupted from behind. Deep, warm, commanding. David Carter." The entire table turned. A distinguished older man with silver hair and a perfectly tailored navy suit walked toward us. Not rushed, but eager. He wasn't greeting Andrew. He wasn't even looking at him. His eyes were locked on me. When he reached my chair, he didn't shake my hand. He hugged me. "David, it's been too damn long." The room shifted audibly, like a collective exhale of confusion and fascination. Andrew forced a laugh. "Hi, Charles. You know my father-in-law?" Small world. The man pulled back just enough to look at him. "Father-in-law?" He turned back to me. "I didn't know Emily married. Congratulations." "She's lucky." Emily pressed her hands over her mouth, not from pride, but shock. Andrew tried again. "We were just having some fun. You know how family nights get." Charles didn't acknowledge him. Instead, he put his hands on my shoulders, proudly, and announced to the entire table, "This man built the original Elkwood staircase and bar. Every curve, every joint, every grain of that wood. It exists because of these hands. Nothing in this club would look the way it does without him." Gasps, whispers. A few guests looked around, stunned, as if seeing the room for the first time. Andrew froze, lips parted, color draining slowly. Charles wasn't finished. He turned his voice toward the table, and beyond, to the room. "We're finalizing the investment for his company next month. Timberline Crafts is about to return, and I'm proud to call him boss soon." A glass clinked onto the table. Someone whispered, "Boss?" Patrick blinked at me with reverence he never had before. I didn't look away from Andrew. He looked like he was drowning on dry land, pale, sweating, jaw twitching. Wait," he stammered. We don't talk about that stuff at dinner. You're misunderstanding. Everything tonight was just jokes." Charles raised a brow. "If that's a joke, it's a poor one." Emily broke. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she stared at her husband. Truly stared, seeing him without the gloss of excuses. "You planned this," she whispered. "All those dinners, all those digs. You wanted people to laugh at him." Andrew grabbed her arm. Don't do this here. We're family." I stood slowly, not sudden, not dramatic, simply ready. The chair legs didn't scrape. I lifted them gently. Quiet respect for the room, and for myself. The silence grew, waiting for what I'd say, waiting for whether I'd spit anger or deliver mercy. I looked Andrew in the eyes, not with hatred, not with victory, but with truth. "You wanted everyone to witness something tonight." He swallowed, desperate, sinking. I nodded once, and they did. I placed my napkin on the table. No slam, no dramatic fold, just deliberate. Charles stepped aside to give me space. Then something astonishing happened. 2 guests, then 3, then 5, rose to their feet as I walked past. Not applause, not spectacle, respect. One man, the one Andrew had been desperate to impress, lowered his head slightly toward me as I passed. Not a bow, recognition. Andrew called after me, voice cracking, "David, come on, man. Don't walk out like you're some hero." He stood too fast. His wine spilled. No one helped him. Andrew shouted louder, voice unraveling. "Everyone is misunderstanding. He's not a big deal. He's just..." No one was listening. Not even his wife. Emily didn't move. She didn't scream or plead. She just stared, shattered, at the man she married. I opened the doors to the main hall. The soft jazz swelling again. Behind me, the long table stayed silent. No fight. No victory lap. Just truth settling, heavy, permanent, in a room designed for artificial shine. And for the first time in a long time, I walked not like someone avoiding attention, but like someone who no longer apologized for existing. The fallout didn't explode. It seeped, quiet, efficient, inevitable. 2 days after the Elkwood dinner, I overheard people speaking my name again, but not the way Andrew had planned. Guests from that night began distancing from him. A colleague canceled a lunch. Another left their shared group chat on mute. Someone from his firm liked a post by one of Andrew's rivals, a tiny digital betrayal. But in corporate circles it screamed, reputation doesn't collapse with a bang. It crumbles. One text from Emily arrived first. Dad, I'm so sorry. I don't know how to face you. Then another. You didn't deserve any of this. I should have stopped him. Then paragraphs, long messages shaped like confessions. She replayed every dinner, every jab, every time she'd laughed it off because it was easier than confronting the truth. She begged for forgiveness, not redemption. She just needed to be heard. I replied hours later, after thinking carefully. We'll talk, but privately. Not over messages, not with Andrew present. She agreed immediately. No excuses, no defenses, just acceptance. In the days that followed, my life began to feel steady again, not triumphant, just aligned. Michael met me at a coffee shop on 5th Street, the same place we used to map out business ideas on napkins decades ago. He hugged me with that old brotherhood strength. You good? He asked quietly. I nodded. Getting there. He slid a folder across the table. Calm, not ceremonial. Investment contracts. Terms are clean. No pressure, no rush. You call the shots. We went through each document slowly, page by page. There was no sales pitch, no adrenaline, just clarity. At the end, we shook hands, not for a photograph, not for validation. Michael grinned. You ready? I took a breath that felt like reclaiming space in my own lungs. I am now. We set a tentative reopening date for Timberline Crafts, not carved in stone, but carved in intention. A week later, I returned to the Elkwood Club, not through the dining hall, but through the service entrance, where the real business took place. Charles met me in his office, glasses on, sleeves rolled up. Nothing performative. He tapped a stack of promotional contracts. We want to commission pieces for the new wing, and if you're open to it, I want to feature Timberline Crafts in the club magazine. Your story deserves to be seen. I shook my head gently. No story, just the work. He smiled, not offended. Then we'll make it about the work. We negotiated respectfully, back and forth, line by line. I requested 2 things, my name attached only to the craftsmanship, not my personal life. Fair compensation for every hour, and every hand involved in the production. Charles signed without hesitation. You've earned it. Twice. There were no handshakes for cameras, no champagne for signatures. Just mutual respect. Life didn't turn cinematic after that. It turned real. The workshop lease approval came. Equipment quotes were finalized. Investors scheduled walkthroughs. I wasn't becoming someone new. I was reclaiming who I used to be. And not once did I think of Andrew while doing it. Not in pride. Not in revenge. Just freedom. One night near the end of the month, heavy rain hit the windows, the kind that turns the world outside into silver. I sat in the living room, lights off, just the lamp by the shelf. The framed photo of Laura rested in my hands. Her voice wasn't in the room, but her presence was. I traced my thumb across the glass, her smile, her eyes. I'm still here, I whispered. Just took me a while to stand up again. A moment passed, still, soft, honest. We're back, not I'm back. We. Because everything I was reclaiming, the business, the confidence, the dignity, came from the life we built together. There was no gloating in me, no fantasy of Andrew hearing about my success secondhand and falling. The part he wasn't the point anymore. Vindication, without bitterness, is its own kind of peace. I turned off the lamp and stayed there quietly, listening to the rain. No spotlight, no audience, just a man returning to himself, measured, dignified, unbroken. 6 months later, the workshop smelled like it used to, oak dust, fresh varnish, and the faint sweetness of linseed oil. Timberline Crafts was alive again. The front bay doors stayed open most mornings, letting in a band of sunlight that cut through the air like a stage light on floating dust. Inside, the rhythm never stopped, saws humming, sanders buzzing, clamps tightening, someone laughing at a joke told over the noise. The team wasn't big. For young apprentices, eager hands, careful eyes, curious enough to ask questions and humble enough to listen. Watching them reminded me of the first time I held a chisel properly. That alertness in the fingertips, the fear of ruining good wood, the hunger to get it right. They didn't treat me like a legend or a mystery, just as someone who knew something worth learning. That was enough. Sometimes Emily visited. Not with an agenda, not trying to rewrite history. Just present. She'd bring coffee for the apprentices, step aside to watch, and only talk when I closed the tool drawer and gave her my attention. We didn't rehash the past. We didn't pretend it didn't happen either. She apologized once, the real kind, where nothing is defended. I knew things were wrong, she said quietly, fingers wrapped around a mug. I just didn't want it to be true. I nodded. Takes strength to admit that now. We didn't hug. We didn't define what came next. Some relationships don't snap or heal. They recalibrate. Little steps. Honest ones. Andrew never came. No dramatic confrontation. No apology. No explosion. Just silence. The kind that closes a chapter more completely than shouting ever could. People asked about him less and less, until they didn't at all. Not because anyone hated him, but because life kept moving forward, and he wasn't part of that motion. Sometimes the most fitting ending is distance. I kept a record player on a small table in the corner of the workshop. Brushed steel, mahogany casing. When the rhythm of the tools slowed, or when I needed to breathe for a few minutes, I'd put on jazz, John Coltrane, Miles Davis, Duke Ellington. The crackle of vinyl blended with the scent of sawdust like they were made for each other. On warm afternoons, sunlight poured across the floor and turned the wood grain into rivers of gold. Sometimes I'd catch myself standing there, just looking, not at the product, but at the place, at the movement, at the continuation. I no longer felt like a man coming back from something. I felt like a man standing in what was his. The apprentices often asked me why I named the business Timberline, thinking maybe it was a reference to a hiking trail or a mountain ridge. I told them quietly, it's the point on a mountain where trees stop growing. Everything above that lives because it survives the wind. They nodded, pretending to understand, but one day, one of them will. Life teaches all of us eventually. I didn't think of that night at the Elkwood anymore. Not with pain, not with satisfaction. He didn't destroy me. He didn't define me. He taught me something, though, unintentionally. How dangerous it is to forget your own worth. There were moments, lonely ones, when I wondered if stepping away from my career meant I'd stepped away from myself. But I hadn't. Grief had demanded pause, not surrender. I was still here. I always had been. The world didn't need to applaud that for it to be true. Late one Thursday, after the apprentices left and the saws cooled, I stood alone in the workshop, the way I used to when Laura would read in the corner and smile every time she caught me humming. Without realizing it, I leaned against the workbench, wiped my hands on a towel, and looked around, at wood, at tools, at life. I didn't win against anyone. I simply won myself back. I reached into my wallet, pulled out the photo of Laura, and rested it against a small block of cherry wood on the bench. Her smile, still warm, still patient, steadied me like a hand on my shoulder. I finally understand, I whispered. Respect isn't inherited. It's earned, even from those who forget who taught them dignity.